This isn't really a story about immigration. It's a story about inheritance. We're going to take a look at the very first generation of Mennonites who were actually born in Mexico, a generation caught between their parents' past and their own very, very different present. And this one line, it just nails it. It's such a powerful distinction, right? They didn't choose this new land. They were born into it, inheriting a legacy from a journey they themselves never even took. So, who were these heirs, really? Well, they were the children who'd never seen the huge Canadian prairies their parents had fled from. For them, home wasn't some distant memory. It was the sun-baked reality of their day-to-day life in northern Mexico. And you can really see the difference between their two worlds here. For the parents, Canada was this collection of fragmented memories. Soft snow, quiet fences, laws they felt they just couldn't follow. But for the kids, their world was immediate. It was tangible. It was the adobe dirt under their fingernails, the sound of the Plautditch dialect at the breakfast table, prayer before every meal. For them, this was normal. But, it's inevitable, right? In any community, a new generation eventually starts to look around and wonder. And this whole story of collective questioning, it really kicks off with the quiet, personal curiosity of a young woman named Alina. Just picture it. 16-year-old Alina Friesen, helping her mother in the kitchen, and she just asks this. It's not coming from a place of rebellion or anything like that. It's just pure, simple curiosity about a life that she can only imagine. And her mother, Anna's answer, wow, it says so much. It's full of caution. You can feel the weight of experience in it. She doesn't just shut the question down. Instead, she reminds Alina about the fundamental trade-off they made. They left fear behind to build something that was truly their own, even with all the hardships. Okay, so Alina's story was about looking back at a past she never knew. But now we need Daniel Reimer, and his story is all about looking outward at the world just beyond his community's borders. And this brings up a huge tension, this principle of separation versus the very human need to connect with others. So what does he do? At 21, Daniel starts this secret project. He's learning Spanish by candlelight from a dictionary he borrowed. But here's the crucial part, his motivation. He's not trying to leave. He's not abandoning his faith. He just wants to understand. He wants to be able to talk to the neighbor who brings firewood or say hello to the man who fixes the millstone. He's trying to build a bridge. But of course, this desire for connection runs right up against the older generation's core belief, which is perfectly summed up by his father's command. For them, separation was survival. It was the only way they knew how to preserve their culture and their faith in this new land. And this is Daniel's powerful response. It's not an argument, it's a question. And it's a question that cuts right to the absolute heart of his generation's dilemma. Does preserving who we are mean we have to live in silence next to our neighbors? Can we be separate without being totally isolated? So you have these individual sparks, people like Alina and Daniel asking these big questions. But they weren't just isolated incidents. They were actually signs of a much larger, much quieter shift that was happening across the whole community. A new generation was really starting to find its voice. So how did this new voice even show up? Well, the change was incredibly subtle. This was not some loud rebellion. It was young men stepping up to lead prayers, young women teaching hymns, teenagers taking it upon themselves to repair roofs for widows in the community. It was in the tiniest details. Little flowers stitched onto a plain apron, or a colorful ribbon used as a bookmark. Each one was a quiet way of saying, I'm here, inside the collective whole. Okay, so we've got the internal questions, right? And we have these small, quiet expressions of identity. So where does it all go from here? Well, it starts to build towards something bigger, collective, active planning for their future. It all kind of came to a head at a big youth meeting. Young people traveled for days by wagon just for a week of fellowship. And in between all the services and the games, those big questions started to bubble up again. And what's so fascinating is the conclusion they came to. They weren't pushing for some radical change. No, they agreed that if change was going to happen, it had to be slow, it had to be deliberate, and it had to be rooted in their core values. And out of all this talk, a really solid, concrete idea started to form. Maybe the most proactive thing they could imagine, a new secondary school, built by them, run by them, for their own kids. And just look at the curriculum they came up with. Math, history, practical medicine, language.
The goal here wasn't to assimilate or become worldly. The goal was to become wiser and more capable in the world they were already living in so they could better serve their own community.
And this brings us full circle, right back to Alina. A line from her journal just perfectly captures the mission of her entire generation. Their challenge wasn't just about preserving their identity like a museum piece. It was about figuring out how to actively carry that identity forward and adapt it for a future their parents could never have imagined. So, as we wrap this up, we're left with this big question. This story really makes you think about the difference between being a passive heir to a legacy and being an active architect of its future. It's a challenge, really, that every single generation faces. How do you honor the past while bravely building a tomorrow that is truly your own?